The crisp weight of the papers in my jacket pocket felt like lead. Across the obscenely long dining table, my father's pronouncement still hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Failure. He'd actually said it, out loud. The word echoed in the cavernous room, bouncing off the polished mahogany and crystal glasses. My mother's gasp was a tiny, wounded sound. Sarah's hand tightened on mine under the table, her knuckles white. And in that moment, seeing the smug satisfaction settle on his face, the years of quiet endurance, of swallowing digs and navigating condescension, they just evaporated. Something cold and hard clicked into place inside me. He thought this was his final judgment, his ultimate truth. He had no idea. The real judgment was right here, folded neatly, waiting. His own words, his own cruel intentions, printed in black and white. And the table wasn't the only thing about to be flipped. Before that night, before the dam finally broke, life had a rhythm. A predictable, slightly off-key rhythm maybe, but ours. I'm Michael, 32 back then, and definitely not the son my father, Arthur Sterling, the property magnate, had envisioned. His world was towering glass buildings, billion-dollar deals whispered over steak dinners, and a ruthless focus on the bottom line. He wore success like an impeccably tailored suit, expecting everyone around him, especially his family, to be equally dazzling accessories. My world, it smelled like illustration software, coffee, and the occasional panic of a looming deadline. I co-owned a small graphic design studio. We weren't building skyscrapers, but we were building brands, helping passionate small business owners find their visual voice. It was challenging, often precarious, but it was work I loved, work that felt meaningful in a way balanced sheets never could. Sarah, my wife, was a high school English teacher, grounded, brilliant, and utterly unimpressed by my father's wealth or bluster. She was my anchor. We lived across town from my parents' palatial prison, in a rented apartment overflowing with books, half-finished paintings, and the comfortable chaos of shared dreams. Our place had warmth, laughter, arguments about who forgot to buy milk, real life. My parents' house, that was different. A modern monstrosity of cold marble, sharp angles, and furniture too expensive to actually sit on. Visiting felt like entering a high-security museum where you were perpetually judged on whether you wiped your feet properly. I remember one dinner there, maybe a year or two before everything imploded. It wasn't unusually awful, just typical. Dad held court, talking about some deal he'd closed, the numbers escalating with each retelling. Then he turned to me. "Michael," he said, swirling his wine. "Met David Harrison's boy today. Young fellow, just made VP at Goldman Sachs. Sharp kid, really going places." He paused, letting the comparison hang there. How's the logo business?" He didn't even try to hide the faint curl of his lip. Sarah had smoothly interjected, talking about a nonprofit project we were doing pro bono, highlighting the positive impact. Dad just grunted, unimpressed by anything that didn't yield a massive profit margin. That was the baseline, a constant, low hum of disapproval, the sense that my life choices were a baffling, slightly embarrassing puzzle he couldn't solve. We endured these mandatory monthly dinners, counting the seconds until we could retreat to our own world, leaving the scent of expensive aftershave and quiet judgment behind. I thought we could keep managing it, keep navigating the tension. I underestimated how deep his disappointment ran and how far he'd go to correct it. The first time his disapproval felt less like background noise and more like a targeted strike was on my 30th birthday. It should have been a happy occasion. Sarah, bless her heart, had thrown a surprise party at our place. Our tiny apartment was packed with friends, laughter, cheap wine, and genuine affection. Even my sister, Chloe, flew in from London. My parents arrived fashionably late, of course. Dad strode in like he was inspecting the premises, offering curt handshakes and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My mother hovered nervously, clutching her purse like a shield. Later, amidst the cheerful chaos, Dad cornered me near the makeshift gift table piled high with thoughtful, quirky present from our friends. He bypassed the pile and handed me a stark white business envelope. No card, no wrapping, just the envelope. Inside, I found a check. A surprisingly large one, enough to make my eyes widen for a second. But tucked behind it was a folded note, penned in his precise, cutting script. Michael, it read, 30 years old. A milestone. Perhaps this capital injection can facilitate a move towards a more stable and appropriate career path. Consider it an investment in realizing your dormant potential. Father, the air went out of me. It wasn't a gift. It was a verdict, a dismissal of everything I was building, disguised as generosity. He hadn't asked about the studio, hadn't acknowledged the late nights, the client wins, the sheer effort. He just saw dormant potential being wasted on playing with crayons, as he sometimes called it, and tried to fix it with a checkbook. The warmth of the party suddenly felt miles away. I mumbled a thank you, the words feeling like sawdust in my mouth. The smile I forced felt tight and unnatural. He just nodded curtly, mission accomplished in his mind, and turned away to talk business with one of my bewildered friends. Sarah saw the whole exchange from across the room. She saw the look on my face, the way my shoulders slumped. Later that night, long after the last guest had gone and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge, she found me staring at the check. She didn't say much, just wrapped her arms around me. "He doesn't get it, Michael," she whispered. "He doesn't see you." That night, the vague unease I always felt around him crystallized into something sharper. It wasn't just disapproval. It felt like he actively wanted me to be someone else. And the question started nagging at me. What would he do if I refused to change? After the birthday check incident, the already strained politeness of our family dinners began to fray noticeably. Dad's comments sharpened, the passive aggression becoming less passive. He developed a particular fondness for comparing me, unfavorably, to the sons and daughters of his associates. Here Jonathan's daughter just published her first novel. He'd announced to the table, critically acclaimed. Of course, she has a proper job in finance too. Writing's just her side project. Then, the inevitable turn towards me. Anything exciting happening in the graphic arts world, Michael? Landed any big poster accounts lately? He knew we'd recently redesigned the entire online presence for a well-respected local charity, a project that had won praise. But acknowledging that kind of success didn't fit his narrative of my inadequacy. Sarah became my unofficial defender, a role she played with grace and steel. Actually, Arthur, she'd say smoothly, Michael's studio just completed the digital rebranding for the Children's Literacy Fund. The feedback has been incredible, hasn't it, honey? I'd nod, grateful but also resentful that I needed defending at my own family dinner. Dad would just wave a dismissive hand. Charity work is admirable, Sarah, but it doesn't build empires, doesn't secure a future. His offers of help also became more persistent, more like demands. He'd email me links to executive MBA programs. He'd try to set up lunches with intimidatingly successful, utterly soulless corporate types he knew. Just explore your options, Michael, he'd say, the implication clear. Any option was better than the one I'd chosen. Each time I politely but firmly declined, explaining my commitment to the studio I'd built from scratch with my partners, I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. That controlled facade would slip for just a second. "Stubborn," he muttered once, loud enough for me to hear. "You'll learn the hard way." Around this same time, his secrecy about financial matters intensified. He'd always been guarded, but now it felt like he was actively constructing walls. Phone calls with lawyers or accountants would end abruptly if I entered his study. Once, fetching him a drink, I overheard a snippet through the heavy oak door. "Absolutely crucial that the structure is ironclad, Henderson. No loopholes. The legacy must be preserved according to my vision, regardless of sentiment." Sentiment? Was I sentiment? My mother's anxiety became almost palpable. She'd fuss over seating arrangements, refill water glasses that were already full, her gaze darting between me and my father. She tried, bless her, to bridge the widening gap, but her attempts were usually clumsy and quickly shut down by Dad. "Helen, let the boy make his own choices," he'd say, though his tone implied those choices were inherently wrong. I saw the worry lines deepening around her eyes. She knew something was shifting but felt powerless to stop it. The unease wasn't just a hum anymore. It was a growing dread. His talk of legacy and vision felt less like abstract concepts and more like weapons being sharpened, aimed squarely at me. What exactly was he planning? And why the intense secrecy? The feeling that I was being deliberately excluded, walled off from my own family's future, began to solidify. The situation escalated dramatically about 6 months before that final, fateful dinner. The passive aggression morphed into outright sabotage. I found out about it indirectly, which somehow made it feel even colder, more calculated. My studio, after weeks of intense work and preparation, was in the final round of pitching for a huge contract, a complete rebranding for a regional tech company that was rapidly expanding. This wasn't a pizza parlor logo. This was the kind of project that could genuinely transform our business, put us on the map. We were ecstatic, buzzing with nervous energy, polishing our presentation until it shone. 2 days before the final pitch, I got a call. Not from my contact in the marketing department, but from the CEO himself, a man named Peterson I'd only met briefly. His voice was awkward, hesitant. "Michael," he began, clearing his throat. "Look, something's come up. We need to put the rebranding project on hold for now. Indefinitely." My stomach plummeted. On hold? Why? Did something change internally? He stammered for a moment. "Well, it's complicated." I pushed, sensing evasion. "Mr. Peterson, we've put hundreds of hours into this. We deserve to know what happened." There was a long pause, then a heavy sigh. "Listen, Michael," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Off the record, your father called me yesterday. Arthur Sterling. We've known each other for years through the Chamber of Commerce." My blood ran cold. I knew instantly what was coming. "Well, he expressed some significant reservations," Peterson continued, sounding deeply uncomfortable, "about your studio's capacity, your financial stability, whether you had the resources and experience to handle a project of this magnitude. He strongly advised me to reconsider, to perhaps look at more established agencies." I couldn't speak for a moment. The sheer audacity, the betrayal, it stole my breath. My own father had actively intervened, used his influence, and lied about my business to kill the biggest opportunity we'd ever had. He said that. I finally managed, my voice tight with disbelief and rage. He said my studio wasn't capable. Essentially, yes, Peterson confirmed grimly. Said he was looking out for me. Didn't want me to take an unnecessary risk. "I'm sorry, Michael." My board got spooked. The call ended. I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing. Fury, cold and sharp, unlike any anger I'd felt before, surged through me. This wasn't just disapproval. This wasn't just meddling. This was deliberate destruction. I immediately called my father. No pleasantries. "You called Peterson," I stated, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't deny it. His tone was infuriatingly calm, almost paternal. "Michael, I heard you were pitching for that tech contract. Far too big for you right now. You have been swallowed whole." I simply offered Peterson some friendly advice. "Saved you both the embarrassment of failing publicly." "Saved me? You sabotaged us." I yelled into the phone. "You lied about our capabilities. You cost us the biggest job we've ever gone for." "I was protecting you from yourself," he retorted coolly. "One day you might thank me for steering you away from these unrealistic pipe dreams." The call ended with me hanging up, shaking with rage and a sickening sense of clarity. The lines were drawn. He wasn't just hoping I'd conform. He was actively working to ensure my chosen path failed, presumably to force me onto his. The "protecting the legacy" comments slammed back in my mind with chilling force. This was all connected. He was manufacturing my failure to justify whatever he was planning with his estate. The need to know exactly what he was doing became an obsession. The suspicion hardened into a conviction. I had to find out what was in his will. I started paying hyper-attention during our tense visits. I mentally cataloged the law firm names on folders I glimpsed on his desk. I decided to reach out to the one person who might offer some insight without immediately reporting back to Dad. Aunt Carol, his younger sister. She'd always been warmer, more grounded, and had experienced her own share of Arthur's controlling tendencies. We met for coffee at a neutral cafe downtown. I carefully steered the conversation. "Aunt Carol," I began hesitantly. "Dad seems preoccupied lately, talking a lot about his legacy. Has he mentioned anything to you? About plans? Or changes?" She stirred her latte slowly, her brow furrowed. "Oh, Michael," she sighed, looking troubled. "Your father, he's been on a tear. Very intense. He did mention updating his estate planning again. Said something about streamlining things and ensuring the Sterling name represented strength and success above all." She leaned in slightly. "He specifically mentioned several long meetings with Henderson. You know how he gets when he's restructuring things. Single-minded. Henderson, his bulldog lawyer. Did he say anything about me?" I asked, dreading the answer. Carol hesitated. "Not directly to me, but he made a comment about disappointments needing to be managed pragmatically." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Be careful, Michael. When he gets like this, he could be ruthless." Her words confirmed my worst fears. Disappointments needing to be managed pragmatically. That was me. He wasn't just disapproving. He was actively plotting to cut me down, legally and financially. The anger I felt was now mixed with a cold, hard resolve. He thought he could orchestrate my life, my failure, and my future from his leather throne? No, I wasn't going to let him write me off. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what his pragmatic management looked like. The hunt was officially on. Getting concrete proof felt like trying to infiltrate a fortress. My father's study was his inner sanctum, his files meticulously organized or locked away. Henderson, his lawyer, was notoriously loyal and tight-lipped. But Dad had an Achilles heel. His supreme arrogance often led to carelessness. He believed his home was inviolable, his authority absolute. He occasionally left things out, assuming no one would dare question or pry. The opportunity arrived, cloaked in domestic normalcy. My mother called one Tuesday afternoon, sounding genuinely flustered. "Michael, darling, could you possibly pop over? Your father's away in Zurich until Friday, and the security system is playing up again. Zone 4 in the study keeps triggering the alarm, and I haven't the faintest idea how to reset that specific sensor bypass. The manual looks like gibberish." My heart gave a distinct lurch. The study, Dad away. It was a calculated risk, relying on Mom's relative tech illiteracy in Dad's absence. "Sure, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I can swing by after work." That evening, I drove over, my nerve jangling. The huge house felt unnervingly quiet without my father's imposing presence. Mom led me towards the study, chattering nervously about the faulty sensor. "It's probably just a loose wire, honestly," I reassured her, my mind racing. As she headed to the kitchen to make tea, "You must have tea," I stepped into the study. The room smelled of expensive cigars and old money. Leather-bound books lined the walls. And there, sitting squarely on the polished surface of his massive antique desk, not tucked away in a drawer, was a relatively thin, cream-colored folder. It bore the discreet, embossed logo of Henderson, Bryant, and Lowe. It wasn't a business file. It looked legal, personal. My breath hitched. My hands felt clammy. I strained to hear Mom moving around in the distant kitchen. Taking a deep breath, I stepped quickly to the desk. My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. The top page read, "Draft, Last Will and Testament of Arthur Sterling, Confidential." This was it. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I felt dizzy. Page after page, I scanned the dense legal jargon, the cold, precise language laying out my father's final, brutal verdict. It was worse than I could have imagined. He hadn't just disinherited me. He'd constructed an elaborate cage. My portion of the estate, significantly smaller than my sister Chloe's, despite her living abroad and having minimal involvement, was locked into a draconian trust. The trustees? Gerald Finch, Dad's most obsequious business ally, a man who worshipped the ground Arthur walked on, and Chloe herself, the golden child, easily swayed by Dad's influence even from afar. The conditions for disbursement were deliberately, exquisitely cruel. I wouldn't see a penny unless I abandoned my financially precarious artistic pursuits, his actual words, immortalized in legal print, and secured a senior management position in a corporation pre-approved by the trustees. There were clauses dictating my public behavior, forbidding association with individuals deemed detrimental to the sterling family reputation, and even requiring annual reports on my career progress. It was a posthumous puppet master routine designed to force me into his mold or leave me with nothing. It was pure spite, dressed up as prudent financial planning, and the bulk of what should have been my share, diverted to establishing the Arthur Sterling Foundation for Entrepreneurial Excellence, naturally controlled by the same trustees, ensuring his name and influence would live on, bankrolled by the inheritance he denied his failure of a son. Rage, sharp and icy, flooded me. This calculated cruelty, it was breathtaking. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Checking the hallway. Still clear. Mom was humming in the kitchen. I quickly, methodically took clear photographs of every single page. The click of the phone's camera shutter sounded like cannon fire in the tomb-like silence of the study, documenting his betrayal piece by piece. I carefully replaced the papers, closed the folder, put it exactly back where I found it, smoothing the cover. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline singing in my veins. I found the alarm panel, fiddled with the sensor wire. It was just loose, and secured it. I went to the kitchen, accepted the cup of tea from my blissfully unaware mother, made small talk for 10 minutes that felt like an hour, then made my excuses. Driving away from that house, the digital copies of his venomous testament felt like they were burning through my phone into my hand. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a glacial fury. He had underestimated me so profoundly. He saw me as weak, as the failure he constantly labeled me. He thought he could control everything, even my future, with his money and his contempt. He thought his secrets were safe behind his walls of wealth and intimidation. He was wrong. He just handed me the ultimate weapon. The upcoming mandatory family dinner loomed large. It wouldn't be another exercise in quiet suffering. It would be the stage for his reckoning. And I had the script. The evening of the dinner arrived like a brewing storm. A heavy, electric anticipation hung in the air, at least for Sarah and me. I'd shown her the photos, laid bare the cruel intricacies of my father's planned legacy. Her initial quiet shock had quickly hardened into a fierce, protective anger on my behalf. "You absolutely have to confront him, Michael," she'd said, her eyes blazing. "He can't wield his money like a weapon and expect no consequences. This isn't just about you. It's about basic human decency." Her unwavering support was the steel reinforcing my own resolve. I printed out the photos, page by damning page. The stack felt substantial, tangible, tucked securely in the inside pocket of my suit jacket. Pulling up to the imposing gates of my parents' estate felt different this time. Not just apprehension, but a grim sense of purpose. Inside, the usual scene unfolded, but amplified by my knowledge. The vast, sterile living room, the faint scent of lemon oil and something vaguely floral. My mother greeted us with a brittle smile, her eyes darting nervously towards the study where my father inevitably held court before dinner. He emerged, brandy snifter in hand, radiating that familiar aura of absolute authority, utterly clueless about the bomb ticking in my pocket. He offered Sarah a practiced, charming smile and me a cursory nod, already dismissing me. Dinner was served in the state dining room, under the oppressive weight of the gigantic crystal chandelier. The table, long enough to host a G20 summit, felt like miles of polished battlefield between me and my father. The clinking of heavy silverware against porcelain was unnervingly loud in the strained silence. Mom chattered brightly about her garden club. Dad lectured on the failings of the current government. Sarah met my eyes across the table, a silent message of solidarity passing between us. I barely touched my food. The perfectly cooked lamb tasted like cardboard. My stomach was a tight knot of adrenaline and years of pent-up resentment. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to be counting down. Predictably, Dad steered the conversation towards his favorite topic, success, defined exclusively in financial terms. He lauded the achievements of a contemporary son who'd just orchestrated a hostile takeover. Then, the calculated pause, the slow sip of expensive red wine, and his gaze settling on me, heavy with disappointment. And then, he delivered the line, the culmination of decades of subtle and not-so-subtle judgment. Honestly, Michael, he sighed, leaning back slightly, the picture of weary paternal wisdom. I look at you, your artistic inclinations, this little studio of yours, and sometimes I just see a failure, a monumental waste of potential. It's a genuine shame. The air crackled. The silence was absolute, broken only by my mother's sharp intake of breath. Sarah's hand found mine again, a fierce, grounding pressure. My father surveyed the table, a flicker of smugness in his eyes, as if he'd finally spoken a difficult but necessary truth. This was the cue. The years of biting my tongue, of absorbing the criticism, of feeling small under his critical gaze, they combusted. A strange calm washed over me, cold and clear. I met his eyes directly across the vast expanse of mahogany. Failure, Dad, I repeated, my voice steady, cutting through the silence. Is that what you see? Or is that simply the narrative you need to construct to feel better about your own plans? He frowned, his patrician mask flickering. What are you talking about, Michael? Don't be dramatic. Oh, I'm not being dramatic, I countered, feeling a surge of power I hadn't known I possessed. I'm talking about legacy, about protecting it, about managing disappointments pragmatically, about your recent, very productive meetings with Henderson. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The color began to drain from his face. A tiny muscle twitched in his jaw. My private legal affairs are absolutely none of your business. They become my business when they star me as the villain in your final act. I shot back. My hand went to my jacket pocket. The rustle of paper seemed unnaturally loud. I pulled out the printed draft of his will. Not angrily, but deliberately. I held it up for a second, then tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed between the silver candlesticks with a soft, definitive slap. I believe, I stated, my voice resonating with newfound confidence, that makes this very much my business. My father stared at the papers as if they were a viper coiled on his pristine table. He looked from the papers to my face, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to disbelief, then to a dawning, horrified comprehension. What? How? He stammered, his voice losing its authoritative timbre. Did you rifle through my desk? You pathetic. You left your judgment out in the open, Dad. I interrupted calmly, cutting off his insult. Just like you carelessly tried to torpedo my career, you carelessly left the blueprint for my humiliation right on your desk. Did you truly think I was so beaten down, so much the failure you paint me as, that I wouldn't figure it out? That I wouldn't defend myself? I reached forward and picked up the top page. The room was utterly still, save for my mother's choked sobs. Let's share your vision for the future, shall we? I announced, my voice ringing clear. Item 4. The Michael Sterling Conditional Trust. I scanned the page. Ah, yes. Trustees. Gerald Finch. I paused, letting the name of his chief yes-man hang in the air. And my dear sister, Chloe. How convenient for her. I continued, disbursement subject to, let me quote, abandonment of financially precarious artistic pursuits and securing pre-approved senior corporate employment. Pre-approved by them. My father lunged, his face mottled with rage. Give me that. How dare you? I easily held the papers out of his grasp. There's more. Clauses on my public image, who I can associate with. It's breathtaking, Dad. Truly. It's not a will. It's a set of chains. A final, desperate attempt to control me from beyond the grave because you couldn't control me in life. A punishment for daring to choose my own path. His face was practically purple now. He was sputtering, speechless with fury. Ungrateful. After everything, the education, the opportunities one gave you. Opportunities? The word broke from me, laden with years of bitterness. You gave me criticism disguised as advice. You gave me condescension disguised as concern. You actively tried to ruin my livelihood. You stand there calling me a failure." My voice rose, fueled by righteous anger. I gestured sharply towards the scattered pages. "This document screams failure. Your failure as a father. Your failure to see value beyond a bank balance. Your epic failure to understand that respect, love, acceptance, they have to be earned, not bought or mandated in a goddamn will." My chest heaved. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of anger, of release. You obsess over your legacy? This cruelty, this manipulation, this bitterness right here, this is the legacy you were trying to cement. I looked at my mother, openly weeping now, shaking her head in distress. I looked at my father, frozen, his face a mixture of apoplectic rage and utter, naked shock. He looked diminished, exposed. Then, with a final surge of adrenaline, I brought my open palm down hard onto the scattered pages of the will, slamming them flat against the table. The sound cracked through the tense silence. Some pages skittered off the edge onto the plush carpet. "There," I said, my voice low but carrying. "There's your precious legacy. Out in the open." I pushed my chair back violently, the legs screeching in protest against the polished floor. "Sarah," I held out my hand without looking away from my father. She took it instantly, her grip strong and steadying. We stood together. "We're done here," I announced to the wreckage of the dinner party. I locked eyes with my father one last time. His face was pale now, his breathing shallow. "You wanted a failure, Dad? Maybe you got one by your standards. But I'm not playing your sick game anymore. I'm not participating in this toxicity." I gave a humorless smile. "Enjoy the rest of your meal. And your legacy." Turning my back on him, on the opulent room, on the life he represented, Sarah and I walked out. We didn't run. We walked, heads held high, through the echoing hallway and out the massive front door. Hearing it click shut behind us felt like the heaviest chain breaking, link by painful link. Freedom tasted like the cool night air. Stepping out of that house felt like surfacing for air after being held underwater for years. The oppressive weight on my chest eased with every step Sarah and I took down the long driveway, hand in hand. The silence in the car on the way home wasn't awkward or tense. It was thick with unspoken understanding, with the gravity of the severed ties, but underscored by a profound sense of relief. I felt emotionally scoured, exhausted, but lighter than I had in decades. Liberated. The immediate fallout was characterized by a profound silence from my father. No angry calls, no demands for an apology, nothing. It was as if, by exposing his plan, I had ceased to exist in his world, which, ironically, was exactly what he'd intended, just not in the way he'd planned. My mother sent a series of tearful, pleading texts over the next few days. "Michael, please call me. We need to talk. Your father is devastated." Misunderstandings. I read them, felt a pang of sorrow for her position, caught in the middle, but I couldn't engage. "Not yet." I replied briefly, telling her I loved her but needed space. A week later, Aunt Carol called. "Michael," she said, her voice a mixture of concern and something like grim satisfaction. "The tremors from your dinner party have reached my shore." She confirmed Dad was incandescent with rage, blaming me entirely for airing private family matters. But, she added, he was also deeply shaken. My mother was apparently distraught, the revelation of the will's contents hitting her hard, making her question years of perceived loyalty. "You threw a grenade into his perfectly constructed world, Michael," Carol said quietly. "He never thought anyone would dare challenge him so directly, least of all you." He's scrambling, trying to spin it, but the mask slipped. Apparently, he had told Mom the draft was just exploring hypothetical scenarios, but the cruelty of the specific clauses was undeniable. The trust between them, already eroded, was fractured, perhaps irreparably. Did he change the will back? Or write a new, perhaps even harsher one? I honestly don't know, and more importantly, I realized I didn't care. The fight was never truly about the inheritance. It was about the lifetime of judgment, the manipulation, the attempt to control my very being. The money was just his weapon of choice. Exposing his plan, confronting his cruelty, that was the victory. In the months that followed, a remarkable thing happened. Freed from the suffocating weight of his expectations and disapproval, my life, both personally and professionally, began to thrive. It was as if a creative block I hadn't even fully acknowledged had dissolved. The studio landed not one, but two major clients within 6 months. Challenging, exciting projects that paid well and garnered industry recognition. One was a boutique hotel chain rebranding. Exactly the kind of substantial client my father might have grudgingly respected, yet I'd won it entirely on my own terms with my team's talent. Sarah and I felt closer than ever, our partnership solidified by the storm we'd weathered. Our cozy apartment, filled with our life and our choices, felt infinitely richer than the coal mansion I grew up in. Looking back now, that confrontation was the hardest, most necessary thing I've ever done. It forced a painful break, but also forced me to finally, fully claim my own life and define my own success. My father wanted to write my story according to his script, casting me as the failure. But by finding the courage to expose his cruelty and walk away, I ripped up his script and started writing my own. He may have the fortune, the empire, the name he values so highly. But I have peace. I have authentic relationships. I have work I'm proud of. I have self-respect. And that, I've learned, is the only legacy worth building. The failure wasn't mine. It was his inability to see beyond his own reflection. And flipping that table, metaphorically scattering his hateful plans, was the moment I truly stepped out of his shadow and into my own light.